Have you ever trusted someone with your most guarded secrets, only to discover that the person by your side had plans to upend everything you believed in? In Westport, Alexander Hart built his life on principles and unwavering commitment. Despite his family's caution and the distance growing between him and old friends due to his own stubborn choices, he remained determined to follow his heart, even when it led him down a difficult path. Michael Sterling, a man once regarded as Alexander's closest friend, harbored ambitions that no one could have foreseen. With every reassuring word, Michael masked a hidden intent that would later shatter Alexander's world. In a decision that defied the values they once shared, Michael seduced Alexander's wife, Isabella, breaking the bond of trust that had long defined their relationship. This act of betrayal set off a chain of events that would leave Alexander isolated and fighting for his very identity. The betrayal deepened when Michael engineered a charge of financial misconduct against Alexander, a carefully constructed case that led to Alexander spending 10 long years behind bars for a crime he never committed. Those years in prison became a crucible, testing the limits of Alexander's resolve and reshaping the man he would eventually become. But it is what happened after those 10 years that makes this tale unforgettable. When Alexander Hart was finally released, his response to the betrayal was both unexpected and powerful. A response that transformed his pain into a driving force for reclaiming his life. Rather than succumbing to bitterness or seeking impulsive revenge, he embarked on a deliberate path to regain control over his destiny. His actions in the months following his release redefined the narrative of his life and sent shockwaves through Westport. Alexander methodically pieced together his shattered existence, confronting the legacy of deceit that Michael had left in his wake. His comeback was not marked by immediate retaliation, but by a strategic reclamation of his reputation and a resolve to expose the truth behind the betrayal. This turning point, where a wronged man began to assert his own justice, is the very reason we recount this story today. In sharing Alexander Hart's journey, we are reminded of the profound impact of betrayal and the strength it takes to rise again. His story invites us to question the true nature of loyalty and to consider what it takes to rebuild when every part of your world has been challenged by deceit. Before the betrayal shattered his world, Alexander Hart was known as a man of unwavering resolve and deep conviction. Born into a family that prized tradition and cautious wisdom, Alexander was raised with a strong moral compass that guided his every decision. His parents, seasoned by life's own hardships, recognized early on that some choices carried risks far greater than the rewards they promised. When Alexander announced his decision to marry Isabella, they were quick to voice their disapproval. They saw in her a charm that might conceal complexities and warned him of potential turmoil. Despite their heartfelt concerns, Alexander's inherent stubbornness propelled him forward. Convinced that his own judgment was infallible and that the heart knew what was best, he dismissed their pleas. This decision, forged in the fires of his determination, would later prove to be one of the many choices that rendered him vulnerable. That same unyielding streak, a quality that had once earned him respect in both his personal and professional circles, gradually began to isolate him. As Alexander climbed the ladder of success in the business world, his commitment to his own ideals sometimes came at the expense of heeding the advice of those who cared for him. Friends who had once been confidants found themselves sidelined as Alexander insisted on his own path, convinced that he alone could navigate the treacherous waters of life and enterprise. His persistent independence, while a testament to his character, created a chasm between him and those who might have offered alternative perspectives or cautioned him against impending dangers. Over time, this isolation grew, subtly at first, then with increasing intensity, leaving him with fewer allies in moments of personal crisis. In the early years, Alexander's world appeared balanced and secure. His business ventures thrived on his relentless drive, and his personal life was built on a foundation of passion and commitment. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly stable existence, the seeds of discontent and vulnerability were quietly taking root. His parents' warnings echoed in his mind, though he chose to dismiss them as mere caution born of love, not foresight. Similarly, the voices of friends who once sought to guide him were gradually silenced by his insistence on making decisions unchallenged. This steadfastness, which had once been seen as a virtue, now stood as a double-edged sword. It carved a path for him that was uniquely his, but also left him exposed to the machinations of those who recognized the gaps in his defenses. In retrospect, the contrast between the solid life Alexander built and the duplicity that would later upend it is striking. His early success was not just the product of hard work and dedication. It was also a reflection of his unyielding commitment to his beliefs, even in the face of mounting opposition. Yet, the very traits that propelled him forward also contributed to a growing sense of isolation. With every well-intentioned warning and every cautious word from those who cared about him, the chasm widened until he found himself standing alone on a path of his own making. This isolation, subtle and cumulative, would later become the stage upon which a betrayal of unimaginable proportions would be enacted. As we examine this phase of Alexander's life, we begin to see how the personal choices of one man, choices made out of conviction and defiance, can set the stage for events that redefine a life forever. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between independence and isolation, between the courage to follow one's own path and the wisdom to heed the voices of those who see the dangers ahead. At a time when Alexander felt more alone than ever, his close friend Michael Sterling began to take advantage of his vulnerability. Michael had been by Alexander's side for years, a trusted friend whose steady presence made the eventual betrayal all the more shocking. Yet, behind the mask of friendship, Michael started spending more time with Isabella, Alexander's wife. Through private conversations and subtle hints, Michael slowly convinced Isabella that her life needed change. Michael, despite being married, made Isabella feel understood and special, drawing her away from the life she shared with Alexander. Their secret meetings grew into a full-blown affair, hidden from the public eye and from those who once believed in their loyalty. When Alexander learned of the affair, the shock was overwhelming. The betrayal hurt him deeply, not just because his wife had strayed, but also because it came from someone he had always trusted, a close friend who should have been on his side. The pain was even greater considering Alexander's years of isolation, where the support of friends had faded away, leaving him vulnerable to such deception. But Michael's betrayal did not stop at the affair. Determined to ruin Alexander's life, he then carefully orchestrated a plan to falsely accuse him of fraud. By manipulating financial records and enlisting the help of insiders, Michael built a case against Alexander, a case for a crime that Alexander never committed. Each false piece of evidence was a deliberate move to seal Alexander's fate and tarnish his reputation. This sequence of events marked the beginning of Alexander's nightmare. A trusted friend's infidelity and calculated deceit not only shattered his personal life but also set him on a path to public disgrace. The actions of Michael Sterling, both as a married man and a close friend, became the catalyst for the cascade of misfortunes that would forever change Alexander's life. After 10 long years behind bars, Alexander Hart emerged into a world that had moved on without him. The harsh reality of prison life had taken its toll, physically, mentally, and emotionally. During those years, every day felt like a struggle against a system that had wronged him, and the loneliness that came from having alienated his closest friends only deepened his sense of isolation. His stubborn nature, which had once been a source of strength, had left him without the support network he desperately needed when the false fraud charges were leveled against him. It was a bitter punishment, one that not only took away his freedom but also shattered his reputation and personal life. While Alexander was confined behind bars, Michael Sterling, the man he had trusted as a close friend, continued to forge his own path with a shocking lack of loyalty. Michael, who was married at the time, had betrayed that trust in the worst possible way by seducing Alexander's wife, Isabella. In a move that would have been unthinkable under any circumstances, Michael later divorced his own wife and married Isabella, cementing his betrayal in a way that left Alexander feeling completely abandoned. This final twist in Michael's treachery was a painful reminder that even those closest to him could turn against him when ambition and desire took over. After Alexander's release, life did not immediately return to normal. He had not only spent a decade in prison but had also battled cancer, a fight that left him physically weakened but mentally resolved to reclaim his dignity. The scars of betrayal and injustice had hardened his resolve, and every moment of his painful recovery was fueled by a burning need for retribution. The turning point came when a mutual friend, who had always admired Alexander and had been equally shocked by Michael's actions, revealed something that would change everything. This friend confided in Alexander that Michael and Isabella were vacationing together at a mountain house, a quiet retreat far away from the life they had known. The friend's words were laced with disbelief, as he admitted he had never expected Michael to take such a drastic step. He explained that Michael's decision to divorce and remarry was not just a personal choice but part of a larger pattern of betrayal that had now reached its peak. Armed with this new information, Alexander began to plan how he could confront the people who had so ruthlessly upended his life. Using contacts he had maintained from before his incarceration and tapping into the remnants of his once thriving business network, Alexander was able to gather details about the mountain house. He discovered the exact location and even arranged a way to get there discreetly. His determination left no room for hesitation. He had to face Michael and Isabella to settle the score and put an end to the pain that had haunted him for so long. One fateful day, Alexander made his way to the secluded mountain house. With every step, the memories of betrayal and the weight of his years of suffering pressed upon him. When he finally arrived at the house, he found Michael and Isabella relaxing in what they had hoped was a carefree escape from their past. In that moment, all the years of injustice, isolation, and heartbreak culminated into a single, irreversible decision. Alexander confronted them in a way that left no doubt about his intentions. In a confrontation that was as swift as it was brutal, he took the lives of both Michael and Isabella. The act was not one of spur-of-the-moment violence, but the result of years of planning and an unyielding desire to reclaim his dignity. After ensuring that there was no turning back, Alexander set the mountain house ablaze, reducing the physical evidence of their treacherous alliance to nothing more than burning ruins. When the flames engulfed the house, Alexander wasted no time in calling the police, making it clear that his actions were driven by the deep wounds of betrayal and the desperate need for justice. In that final, decisive moment, everything that had built up over a decade, the isolation, the wrongful conviction, the betrayal by a trusted friend, and the ultimate humiliation of seeing his wife abandon him, came crashing down into a single act that would forever change the course of his life. This sequence of events, marked by unimaginable personal suffering and a carefully executed plan of revenge, serves as a testament to how deeply one can be scarred by betrayal. It is a story of a man who was forced to rebuild himself from the ashes of a shattered life, and who, in the end, decided that the only way to find closure was to confront those who had wronged him head-on. Following the shocking events at the mountain house, the case took on national proportions. Alexander Hart was arrested and quickly brought to trial. The court found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Yet, the punishment proved to be as devastating as the betrayal that had set everything in motion. Just a few weeks into serving his sentence, Alexander passed away. His death, coming so soon after his sentencing, sent shockwaves through the community and left many questioning the true cost of betrayal and retribution. The scandal that erupted in Westport rocked the entire business community and stirred intense public debate. Business leaders and ordinary citizens alike struggled to understand how a story that began with personal betrayal could escalate to such a dramatic and violent end. News outlets covered every detail, analyzing how trust was broken and how ambition could lead to actions that hurt not only individuals but also the fabric of society. Many were left to wonder if the intense drive for success and the stubborn refusal to heed advice had contributed to the tragedy in ways that no one had anticipated. In the aftermath, experts and commentators examined the themes at the heart of this story. One recurring point was the idea that deep-seated personal flaws, like Alexander's stubbornness, can have far-reaching consequences. His refusal to listen to his family's warnings about Isabella and his tendency to isolate himself from those who cared for him created a situation where he was left vulnerable to Michael Sterling's deceptive influence. The case became a stark reminder that our personal choices, especially when driven by unchecked pride, can open the door to betrayal and manipulation. Observers noted that Michael Sterling's betrayal was not simply an act of personal ambition gone awry. It was a calculated effort that exploited every weakness in Alexander's life. Michael, who was once considered a loyal friend, took advantage of the isolation Alexander had imposed on himself. His actions, first by seducing Isabella and then by framing Alexander for fraud, demonstrated how ambition, when mixed with personal failings, can lead to irreversible damage. The unfolding of these events highlighted a dangerous chain reaction. A man's deep-rooted flaws can set off a series of events that not only destroy relationships but also upend entire lives. Many analysts asked a poignant question in the wake of the tragedy. Could Alexander Hart's fate have been different if he had heeded the early warnings of his loved ones? His parents, friends, and even acquaintances had all tried to offer advice, urging him to be more cautious in both his personal and professional life. Unfortunately, his insistence on following his own path left him isolated and, ultimately, unprepared for the betrayal that would come from someone so close. The case invites viewers to reflect on the importance of listening to those who care about us, and to consider how neglecting sound advice can have far-reaching consequences. Public reaction to the case was mixed. While some sympathized with Alexander's years of suffering and the injustice he endured, others condemned his decision to take such drastic revenge after his release. The media frenzy turned the entire episode into a topic of national debate, with pundits and experts discussing the balance between personal vengeance and the societal need for justice. In boardrooms, coffee shops, and online forums, people weighed in on whether Alexander's actions, though extreme, were the inevitable result of a lifetime of isolation and betrayal. Looking at the broader implications, this case serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the cost of letting personal flaws go unaddressed. It reminds us that every choice we make can have consequences far beyond what we initially imagine. The cascading effects of betrayal in Alexander's life, a loyal man betrayed by his closest friend, continue to spark discussions on trust, loyalty, and the heavy price of pride. In reflecting on this tragic saga, we are left to ask ourselves, what might have happened if Alexander had embraced the advice of those who cared for him? Could a different path have prevented such a devastating outcome? These are the questions that linger long after the headlines fade, serving as a powerful reminder of the human cost of betrayal and the importance of nurturing our relationships before it's too late. As we bring this turbulent saga to a close, let's take a moment to revisit the journey that transformed a man of principle into a tragic figure marked by pain and loss. Alexander Hart's story began with his isolated beginnings, a man whose stubborn pride and determination led him to disregard the wise warnings of his family. His parents, who understood the dangers of unchecked passion and impulsive choices, cautioned him against marrying Isabella, yet his resolve carried him forward, setting the stage for the heartbreak to come. From those early days of isolation, Alexander's life was further complicated by the betrayal of a man he trusted implicitly, his close friend Michael Sterling. Michael's deceit unfolded in two devastating acts. First by seducing Isabella, the woman Alexander loved, and then by framing Alexander with a false fraud charge that would lead him to spend a decade behind bars. While Alexander suffered the crushing weight of these false accusations and the loneliness of prison life, Michael's betrayal was deepened by a final, cruel twist. While Alexander was paying the heavy price of his wrongful conviction, Michael divorced his own wife and remarried Isabella. This act not only compounded Alexander's personal humiliation but also sealed his fate in a way that echoed the very warnings he had once ignored. The tragic series of events, from the early family objections and neglected advice to the catastrophic consequences of misplaced trust, offer profound lessons on the dangers of pride and stubbornness. Alexander's journey is a stark reminder that ignoring the counsel of those who care for us can leave us vulnerable to the manipulations of others. It shows us that personal flaws, when left unaddressed, can cascade into a series of events that not only shatter lives but also lead to irreversible actions. Now, I invite you to reflect on this story and consider some essential questions. Could Alexander's fate have been altered if he had listened to his family's warnings? How do personal flaws, such as an unyielding stubbornness, contribute to larger, more destructive outcomes? What role does trust, or the betrayal of that trust, play in the choices we make and the lives we lead? Your thoughts and insights on these questions are valuable, and I encourage you to share them in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into a story of betrayal, revenge, and the heavy cost of unchecked desires compelling, please like, share, and subscribe. By joining our community, you'll be part of ongoing discussions that explore the intricate dynamics of human relationships and the often painful lessons they teach us. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in listening to those who care for us.